I'm Jeanine 3AM. Thanks for being with us tonight. And thank you once again for making Justice the most watched cable news show last Saturday. Another great hour on tap tonight. Dr. Sebastian Gorka among my guests, who is standing by with some inside perspective on the White House as it deals with the fallout from the resignation of White House Staff Secretary Rob Porter and more. But first, my opening statement. Can you tell a book by its cover? Should you assume that the story inside is consistent with representations on the outside? Similarly, have you been tricked into thinking someone was an upstanding person, only to find out that the person inside was totally different? It's nothing new. It happens to all of us all the time. As a young assistant DA, I started the first domestic violence unit in a prosecutor's office in the nation. I fought on behalf of all victims, but my crusade was for the battered woman. The women who were shot, stabbed, beaten, and brutalized by the very men who said that they loved them. This week, White House Staff Secretary Rob Porter turned out to be someone whose cover is different than the content of his character. Porter is accused of physically assaulting both his ex-wives. The uproar was predictable. How can someone who works in the Oval Office, who walks with the president, be a batterer? Why didn't we know? Why didn't we know sooner? And who can we blame? Late today, I spoke with senior White House official, a senior one, about the process and was reminded that on January 20th of last year, a completely new White House staff arrived. Everyone was given a form, an SF-86, a multi-page questionnaire that seeks everything about you, from your high school friends to your bank records to your residential addresses, foreign travel, your employment, foreign contacts. And when the form is turned in, the FBI begins its investigation. In the normal course of events, it can take 6, 7, or 8 months, but rarely less than 6. Complicated ones, like those with high finances, take a lot longer. And as part of its investigation, the FBI reaches out then to local field offices for them to interview the people referenced in the background form. And then additional references from the local offices are then requested, and it fans out even further. General John Kelly arrived at the White House on July 29th, and as you might imagine, giving his background as a retired Marine 4-star general, the first since the Korean War to be promoted to that rank while in active combat, he started to check out security clearances. Because Kelly saw it as unusually long, he told Don McGahn, the White House counsel, that the FBI needed to speed up their investigation so that, quote, we could get a sense of these folks. In the case of Rob Porter, a very senior White House staffer, Kelly was advised it was complicated. But since nothing specific was highlighted, Kelly said, we just need to get these clearances as quickly as possible. Now, at the end of December, or the beginning of January of this year, with no feedback, he started to consider that particular situation serious. And to the best of his recollection, the background investigation from the FBI had not yet reached the White House, which then, according to protocol, does its own investigation after they review the FBI's investigation to make a recommendation. This past Tuesday, February 6th, was a typical day for General Kelly, working as chief of staff in a fast-moving administration, going up to Capitol Hill on DACA, and then returning to the White House at 6:30 p.m., where several communication people sat in his office. The press had called, inquiring about Rob Porter and an ex-wife who had gone public to say she had been abused. Porter was immediately called into Kelly's office and asked if that was true. Porter lied and said it was untrue. He was then queried by Kelly as to whether there was a police report, was there a restraining order of any kind. He denied that again. Within minutes, another reporter called saying the first wife had now suffered significant physical abuse. That was enough for Kelly. although he had seen no picture like the one you're looking at on the screen. At 7:30 that same night, he told Porter, "You and I both know what's got to be done here." And he accepted Porter's resignation. Kelly, within a few moments, called his deputy chief, advising him of Porter's resignation, telling him he gave Porter permission to come in the next day and clear out his office. So I ask you, Kelly hears about this at 6:30. He calls Porter in. No pictures, no police report, no restraining order. He tells Porter, "Be gone," within 40 minutes. Kelly did what you would expect a leader to do. There was no excuse. There was no hesitation, no justification. He had to go. So, for everyone who's looking for someone to blame, chill out. You want to blame someone? Blame the batterer. He doesn't walk around with a scarlet letter or a sign on his forehead that says, "I beat women." He is cunning and clever, presenting himself as a charming individual who's a Rhodes Scholar with a Harvard degree. You want to stop a four-star general who is running the White House, who believes in chain of command, who makes a decision within 40 minutes because you hate Donald Trump? Find another scapegoat. You might want to look at the last president. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram. Hashtag Judge Jeanine. And former Deputy Assistant to the President and Fox News National Security Strategist, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, joins me now. All right, Doctor, did you hear that one?
I did. Very powerful.
Well, here's what I want to ask you. What is it like? You were in the White House. What is it like? What do you know about security clearances? Does any of this make sense to you?
Sadly, it does, Judge Jeanine, and thank you for your role in championing battered women in the past. There is a bigger issue here. General Kelly was decisive, as you expect a four-star former general to be. But the question is, who's in control of the background investigations and the clearance process? I can tell you, I'm not going to name names, but we had some amazing candidates. One of them was supposed to come into a senior directorship position in the National Security Council, and the people handling the background clearances, specifically the CIA, slow-rolled it. So there's an issue of, if they want to gum up the works, if they want to make the Trump administration's job harder and harder, they play bureaucratic slow rolls. And there may be a deliberate minefield put in place where they know somebody like this has skeletons in their closet, and they slow roll everything just to make things like this explode a few months later.
But
so
you know,
the president has to assert control over this system.
Okay, but see, here's the problem. The FBI is dealing with all kinds of stuff. I know, when I was a DA, I did background checks on everybody who came to work for me. Whether they had already been there or not, we did background checks, all right? Here is the issue. The issue is when someone says it's going to take a year to figure this out. No, this is easy stuff. You make a decision based on the evidence. I understand the staffing problem, that this is not a priority for maybe the local offices who are dealing with crime, who are dealing with foreign terrorists, and all kinds of other issues from RICO on down. But this doesn't take that long. So I wonder if your theory is correct, that it was a slow roll.
Well, look, it shouldn't take so long, but the bottom line is, Judge, we've got 1 million people, over 800,000 people with clearances, thanks to the Obama administration. There's been a massive mushrooming of the clearances in D.C. So, it should be, you should be able to get an interim clearance with a phone call to the Bureau. The Bureau checks, does this guy have a criminal record or not, and they should be able to give you an interim. A full one, a full scope clearance should not take more than 2 months, in my opinion, because it's a matter of interviewing people and the people who know this individual. So I agree, in theory, this should be efficient, but the swamp has many ways to undermine an administration.
And you know what's amazing to me, Dr. Gorka, is that here you've got General Kelly, who is dealing with, with the incredibly fast-moving White House. I mean, I can't even imagine what's on the president's desk. All right, and then you're getting at this point down to some you've got a staffer problem. You're dealing with world issues. You're dealing with national issues. You're dealing with health issues. You're dealing with DACA. You're dealing with the knives and the guns that are aimed at everybody and aiming at each other. Right. And, so then you hear about a staff issue. You make a decision in 40 minutes, and everybody who hates the general or hates Trump wants him out. What did he do wrong?
The reality is that nothing was done wrong. If there was an issue here, then it should have been disclosed during the background investigation. Otherwise, if it was being slow-rolled, the general could have said what's going on.
Which he
did. But at the end of the day, yeah, which he did. But at the end of the day, the real issue here is the bench is so shallow. When we moved into the West Wing on January the 20th, Judge, it was a couple of dozen people who'd walked with the president for that year and a half, and we had to fill positions like crazy. So, it was a merry band of women, men and women, that it was like, Robin Hood took over federal government, and as a result, a lot of people had to be found, a lot of warm bodies, and these are the kinds of problems that can come afterwards.
Right, right. Well, I'll tell you, they certainly have said very nice things about this man, and obviously you know what I think of him, but at the same time, I think it's inevitable in any administration. And, this one, the last one, or the one before it, you're going to have people with problems who don't come in and say, hi, I got a problem, check me out. Anyway, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, it's always good to see you. Thank you so much.
Great to see you, Judge.
All right, and now to our other big story tonight. President Trump defends his refusal to release the Dems' memo, saying the Democrats knew the memo would require heavy redactions. Here with reaction to this and much more, Republican Congressman Chris Stewart, who is a member of the House Intelligence Committee. All right, Congressman, welcome to Justice. It's nice to have you on tonight. I imagine that you've had a very interesting year or so on that committee.
Oh, my gosh. Interesting is a great way to describe it.
Okay. Let me ask you this. So all the Republicans vote not just for a release of their memo, their summary of what they saw in the classified documents, but all the Republicans voted for the Democrats' memo to be released. Now, none of the Democrats voted for the Republican memo to be released. You find something political about that, or partisan?
Well, yes, but believe me, that's the least of the partisan things that we've seen and heard from this committee. Oh my gosh, think about where they are. Here you have the Republicans who put forward our memo, and it's devastating. And it's just true. It's irrefutable. Hillary Clinton hired Fusion GPS, who then used a foreign agent to create this dossier that everyone now knows is just political garbage, and the FBI hid that fact from the FISA court. And the Democrats and the committee, and generally, for some reason, which I genuinely don't understand, they don't want people to know that. But again, it's irrefutable. So they look at our memo and they say, how do we change the story? And I'll give them credit. It was very clever. When I started to read their memo, a couple paragraphs down, I go, that's going to have to be redacted. This is going to have to be redacted. And they're going to have the memo redacted, and then they'll claim, well, we could tell our story. We could tell the truth, but the president pulled it all out, and he's not letting us tell the American people. And as I said, it's very clever, but it doesn't change the facts. And I think the president was right when he said, send it back to the committee and you guys fix it. I'll release it.
Look, if the Republicans went to the trouble of making sure that there were no sources or methods revealed, and therefore there was no problem other than DOJ and FBI saying, don't, the sky's going to fall, and Christopher Wray saying, don't put their names in it. You want to tell me why you couldn't put their names in it?
Yeah.
Who was Christopher Wray defending other than his own FBI guys? All right, so most of whom, are leaving or have been asked to leave. That's what's so crazy about this. Christopher Wray needs to be asked, what name did you want to be not revealed here? Peter Strzok, McCabe, the people that are clearly in trouble. And by the way, have you heard the name Bill Priestap in the FBI, who's the head of counterintelligence and Strzok's boss?
Yeah, we've heard that name, and you're going to hear more of that name. I want to go back, though, to something you said.
No, I want to go back to Priestap, but you go back first. Go ahead.
Well, okay, so look, some members of the FBI and Department of Justice were criticizing this memo and refusing to, saying we shouldn't release it when they had not yet seen it.
Right.
They had no idea what was in it, and they were condemning the memo and saying we were reckless for releasing it, and they had not seen it. And look, when we wrote this memo, we were very, very careful.
Well, obviously,
we knew we wanted to release it.
Congressman, look, we thought there was nothing in there that brought this guy down or that revealed a source or a method. But I want to go back to Priestap, and I want my audience to remember this name, Bill Priestap. And I'll tell you why I'm asking. I don't like that I haven't heard of him. We've heard of the whole hierarchy, everybody on that 7th floor. And there's one guy we don't hear about, and that's Priestap. Comey threw him under the bus and said that this guy who was Strzok's boss told Comey not to advise Congress of certain things. And the fact that we haven't heard from Priestap tells me he's cooperating with someone or what?
Well, look, I'm going to be careful on this.
I know you are.
I'm not sure what we can say on this, and believe me, I don't want to be the headline of Chris Stewart reveals a bunch of sensitive or classified information.
That's okay. It's good for the show. Go ahead.
Well, and that's what, of course, some people would hope that we would do. But look, there's this thing that Director Comey surrounded himself with, and I'm going to say this, and I say it carefully, but it's true. He surrounded himself with political, progressive hacks. That's exactly right. And they don't reflect the entity of the Department of Justice or the FBI. The FBI is by nature kind of center, maybe center right. These guys aren't like your typical FBI agent, and it wasn't just by chance that happened. Very clearly, they were selected by the director.
Congressman, how does someone go from the Hillary campaign investigation to the Trump investigation onto Mueller's team? I mean, this was a whole chorus of individuals, and we don't want them right or left or anything. We want them to look at the law, to be who they are, and let's make one thing clear. Everybody in the FBI, for the most part, is doing their job as well they should and as we appreciate. Anyway, Congressman Chris Stewart, thanks for being with us.
Could I make one comment on that real quickly?
Real fast.
Look, I've been contacted by FBI agents. They're saying, thank you for doing this. We want you to protect the integrity of the agency.
Good. And I've been contacted by them as well. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Judge.
And Congressman Louis Gohmert, still on deck tonight and next. The FBI under fire from the president and Republicans. So is there real cause for an investigation? I'm joined live by former FBI Assistant Director James Kallstrom. It's important insight on this that you can't miss, and it's only here. Welcome back to Justice. On this busy night of developing stories, my next guest spent 25 years with the FBI and has a wealth of insight about everything that's been going on. Joining me now by phone, former Assistant Director James Kallstrom, whom I worked with for many years. It's always good to talk to you, Jim.
Hi, Judge.
Okay, Jim, let's talk about what this FISA warrant. And I want to talk about the fact that it appears relatively clear, if not absolutely clear, that there were FBI agents who made representations to the FISA court that were not correct. And every day, Jim, we get a little bit more about how the Clinton campaign and the DNC, paid Fusion GPS, and then they got to the Steele, and then he went to the Russians. And now we've got Christopher Blumenthal in this mix, Sidney Blumenthal, who is that pal of Hillary's we heard about at Benghazi, whose emails were accessed that told us she had gotten emails on Benghazi. And now he may be part of the actual creation of the make-believe story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very, very clear. I think the way you describe it is correct. I think it's almost perfectly clear that these FISA judges were presented with information that, first off, was bogus, second off, that was paid for by the DNC and the Clinton Foundation, and that knowledge apparently was not passed on. And quite frankly, a lot of this information is looking more and more like it comes from this cabal that has always circled the Clintons, with providing basically trash information. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's some information that's been thrown in there by the intelligence community.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of this really did come from Russia. I think we'll find out that a lot of it came from, people, like possibly John Brennan and other people like that.
Well, that they were involved. And, you know, what I find so stunning is that, you know, the FBI is saying don't put their names out with respect to the Republican memo. There was a summary of what they learned in the Intelligence Committee. And, you know, then when they come out with this information, it's stuff that we already knew, that we had been hearing reports on. And yet the Democrats they have put all kinds of sources, methods in their memo, which, of course, forces the president's hand. He cannot release it. It's intentional. All right.
It's all intentional, you know, and it's still, you know, it's this phony Russian thing to try to derail the presidency. Well, and that's all it is. That's all they have is this phony business.
Well, and the sad part about it, Jim, is that they made it up as they went along, that in July, after they let Hillary go, then they decide that they're going to need an insurance policy, and then they begin the, you know, Trump investigation. And by the way, do you know this guy, Bill Priestap, Jim?
I don't know him personally, but I understand that he was the head of counterintelligence for the FBI.
All right.
Well, so he would have been he would have been an assistant director at least.
Yes, he was.
And that guy with all the text messages reported to him.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. What statutes are we talking about that if they lied to these judges that we could that they could be charged with?
You know, I took a look at that and discussed it with a couple of U.S. attorneys, and you know, it's amazing. You know, first off, there's criminal contempt, and then there's false statements, and then there's conspiracy to lie to the FISA court. These are all Title 18 crimes.
Right.
And then there's denying civil rights, you know, to the Trump et al. Group under the color of law.
Right.
And then there's conspiracy to do that, and then, of course, there's perjury. So, I mean, this is serious, serious business.
Well, and you know what's amazing is with respect to fraud on the court or, you know, a conspiracy to defraud a court, I would think that if John Roberts, the United States Supreme Court, appoints these judges who are federal judges to sit as FISA judges, I would think that a directive would come on high, from on high, to find out what is being presented to his judges that is apparently perjurous, if not absolutely criminal in terms of violation of the law.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, this is a serious business. I think there is an awful lot of exposure here for the people that sign these affidavits and sign these orders. And the last one that I know of that was signed, at least, was done by the current Deputy Attorney General.
Rod Rosenstein.
Now, does he not know that this is phony information that he's signing off on?
And he's still sitting there. All right, Jim Kallstrom from the FBI. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, and Michael Tamaro and his list of the week's most outrageous comments from the left still ahead tonight. And next, Katrina and Chris ready to clash. Donald Trump's former spokesperson and Chuck Schumer's former aide. This is well matched. They take each other on next on the panel. Don't move.
America's News Headquarters, I'm Marianne Rafferty. 2 police officers killed in the line of duty in Westerville, Ohio today. Officers Anthony Morelli and Eric Joring were shot and killed when responding to a 911 hang-up call. Governor John Kasich, himself from Westerville, called the slain officers the finest among us. Police apprehended the suspect but have not released any further information. According to local news, was wounded and is being treated at a hospital. And 41 people and 1 dog rescued from the waters of San Francisco Bay after a sightseeing boat ran aground on the Berkeley Reef. The boat was chartered by a birdwatching group. The Coast Guard says all passengers made it back to solid land and no serious injuries were reported there. I'm Marianne Rafferty. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
A blowout battle on The View Friday prompted by these comments about Rob Porter's resignation.
But why is Kelly so shocked?
Well, we shouldn't make levy of this. We're talking about the abuse of a woman. I mean, look at that photo. We should not be laughing or making.
We're talking about Kelly. We're not talking about abuse right now. Don't say something like that.
We are laughing and making.
We are laughing at him being shocked.
It's not. It's very serious.
Well,
and as a Republican, I am offended.
As a Democrat, I'm offended by Republicans.
You know what?
I don't know how she sits there. Anyway, my political panel is here, and they're ready for a battle of their own. Former Trump campaign spokesperson Katrina Pearson and former Chuck Schumer radio talk show host Chris Hahn. All right, guys. Do you think it's a little unusual to turn this into a hate Kelly moment as opposed to there are batterers among us, there are women who suffer silently, who get abused and don't get their, don't get real justice, Chris?
Well, look, I mean, if he was enabling him to stay there, then
no, he
should be held accountable, and I think that's something we've got to find out. Well, I don't know what he knew and when he knew it, and that's the question everybody's got to ask, and he's got to answer to the American people.
Chris?
If he knew about this, then of course it's a problem. If he just found out about it,
did you
then
listen
I guess
to my open?
It's not his fault.
Chris, did you listen to my open?
I did.
Okay, I spoke to about as senior as you can get in the White House to get that information. Go ahead, Katrina.
You know what, Judge? Your opening was absolutely spot on. General Kelly is a great man. I've met him. I've talked to him. He honestly did not know everything. And I don't know why this notion that somehow John Kelly is responsible for this. Rob Porter was brought in by Reince Priebus. So why would John Kelly know anything about that on the offset? Now what's happening is he's a target. That's exactly what this is. The president is doing well. The economy is picking up. His poll numbers are coming up. And so what happens? They go after the chief of staff, someone that has been helping the president be successful.
Well, you know what's interesting, Chris, is that, and I think we've got these numbers here, poll numbers for the president handling the economy prove 51%. 51%. And you and I both know if it says 51, it's probably 61, because most people won't admit to thinking positively of President Trump.
Look, the economy is going well right now. I'm not going to fault him for anything that's going on in the economy. I don't think anybody will. But I think there's some other things that have to be looked at here, too, besides the economy, things that the president actually has control over. The president promised us all that he would bring in the best people. And so far, it hasn't seemed that way. There are a lot of people who are not the best people, and that's not all his fault. And I'm not going to say it's all his fault. But he is ultimately responsible for the people who come work for him, and he needs to ferret out people who have situations like this. Whether they've found out through the FBI or not, these are the kind of people the president should not be surrounding himself with.
Do you really think General Kelly or the president should put on their Sherlock Holmes outfit and get out there and check out someone who doesn't even have a criminal record? Should they scan the country? Go ahead, Katrina.
I think...
Well, I'm going to agree with Chris on this, Judge. He's right. It's not all the president's fault because the president is not responsible for doing these background checks. And you have to ask yourself, why has it taken this long for the top staff in the West Wing to not have their clearance yet? That is the question which leads us right back to the compromise in the FBI and the DOJ that has been doing a ton of things to continue to hurt this administration even before it began.
Chris?
But, Katrina, Mr. Porter had access to top secret documents and be above every single second of his existence in the White House. And for a president who basically got elected because his opponent was accused of mishandling top secret information, to be so lax with somebody who handles top secret information on a daily basis, that is very surprising to me and to the American people. Go ahead.
No, I don't think that is surprising since it's standard protocol in an incoming administration. Your staffers get a temporary clearance and they go on from there, and the FBI is supposed to be doing their job. But what is horrible when it comes to classified information is Uma Abedin using her husband's email, Hillary Clinton using a private server. These are actual crimes. These are crimes, Chris, that's totally different.
Yeah. Well, I think Mr. Porter handling top secret information may have been a crime, too, and I think it's something that should be looked into, don't you?
It can't be a crime if it's protocol. You don't get your background clearance in 24 hours. It would be nice.
Hold on a minute.
It would really be nice. It would really be nice if the FBI could actually do these background checks. Why is it taken over a year to get this done for the president's top staff? That's the question. Why is it taking this long?
Katrina, you're an excellent pundit, and I shudder to what you would have said if this was President Clinton's staff secretary being thrown out because he couldn't get clearance because he was beating his wife. Trust me, you would be calling for a congressional inquiry. And believe me, there will be a congressional inquiry in about 10 months when Adam Schiff is given subpoena powers.
Well, I think it's going to be amazing in 10 months when we're back on the show talking about the downfall of the Clinton dynasty finally, because it's long overdue. We're seeing her cronies involved in this very investigation of the current president of the United States. There have been crimes committed here.
I've moved on from the Clinton dynasty.
And the House have already uncovered a ton of information showing that she's absolutely involved in all this. And the question, Chris, is what did Obama know and when did he know it?
Chris, I got to ask you a question.
Obama.
Chris,
it's Obama's fault that Rob Porter broke the law.
You do this all the time. If something happened in the past, it doesn't matter anymore. If someone kills another person, if a year or two passes, do you just ignore it? Are people absolved of their criminal liability or responsibility because of the passage of time? Because maybe there was a corrupt law enforcement effort that tried to protect them?
Judge,